I was just thinking about that today.
Were you?
Like, I was thinking about how a lot of people will say certain things are objective and subjective, and it's interesting to consider how there are, you know, religions or certain people that hold those beliefs where certain things are not considered, you know, morally correct when they actually are to most people. So it doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know of a society of history or one that exists today that is okay with adultery, for instance. You know, you look at history, or child molestation, for instance. Somebody having sex with a child is considered by even cultures that believe in the sun is God or whatever. They would say that something like that is wicked.
So, can I just ask what made you want to become someone who wants to abolish abortion?
I'm a Christian, so you know, as I was what's your name?
Scott.
I'm Norman, by the way, and you are?
Eliza.
Eliza, nice to meet you. As a Christian, I have an objective standard. The Bible is, I believe, there is a God. How do I know? Because of the impossibility of the contrary. If there is not the God of the Bible, we can't explain anything. But as a biblical Christian, I can explain what are morals, what's right and what's wrong. I can explain that. I can explain what you are. You are made in the image of God, but you have fallen, and that you need to have your sins forgiven, that there is such thing as sin, that you've broken God's law. I've broken God's law. But as a Christian, I see that the one and only true God who revealed himself in the Bible said, I will make a way for you to be forgiven of your sin. And that will be, I will come to this earth, live the perfect life, die on the cross, and take the punishment that sinners deserve upon myself as an innocent one. Jesus Christ was innocent, right? And then God will then give me the holiness and righteousness of Christ. So
would you say being a Christian, like to someone who's not a Christian, that's a subjective experience? Like,
no.
Like, so Christian to you is like absolute truth?
No, that's, yeah.
Okay.
I would say, yeah, there is absolute truth. And I think you would even admit that, because even to make the statement there is no absolute truth is making an absolute truth statement.
That's yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So all it would be would be a self-defeating statement. There are no absolutes. Are you absolutely sure about that? Right? So
what specifically does that have to do with abortion?
Specifically because the revealed law of God says, hey, it's nice to meet you. You take care. Thanks for talking.
Hello.
How are you?
Doing good.
Good.
I gotta go.
All right. Yeah, I'll be here sometime if you want to stop and talk about it.
Okay, I would, but
Yeah.
work.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, the Connecticut Foundation to Abolish Abortion.
Okay. Have a nice day.
Yeah. So the law of God, like the Torah, the word Torah has to do with light. And Israel was different than all the cultures around in that period, because what made them different is that God, Yahweh, gave them a moral standard of himself and expressed in the Ten Commandments. So while the other cultures are having orgies, aborting the babies, you know, going nuts, and you know, even the word Hades or hell, Gehenna, was like the garbage dump outside of the towns where they would dump the babies, or they would dump the refuge of human waste and all that kind of stuff, and it would stink. Lots, it is today.
So modern, so like in a more modern sense. So I mean, obviously, I know you've gotten this question, I'm sure, about what if a child gets raped?
A child gets what?
Like, say a child gets raped.
Yeah.
A lot of the it's
a good question.
I'm pro-abortion, but I also think like there shouldn't be a black and white, like, and all of it's okay and all of it's not okay.
Okay.
But I mean, if you think it's not all okay, that's the way you just live your life, right?
Yeah.
But my perspective is, if someone's life at stake, if a woman's life's at stake, if a child's life at stake, I think that there needs to be exceptions.
Okay. So if a child's life is at stake inside of a mother, you would be okay with the killing of the mother to save that child?
No.
Okay, all right, but you'd be okay with the killing of the child to save the mother?
That's the thing.
Why is that?
Something like science would come into play. Is this a full, you know, it's case by case. Like, is this an actual developed child?
Can science answer the theological questions, because science, if I understand
That's a good
science,
question.
so
That's where it
I mean, that's where Adolf Hitler would say our science is that Jews are less than Germans and Aryans, so they must die, right? So it's an arbitrary use of science. Science can only be what I can observe and what I can repeat.
That is what science is.
So science can't make those greater statements about truth and so forth. So we have a baby and we have a mother. We have a human being in the mother's womb, granted, dependent upon the mother, and we have the mother herself.
Right.
Who has more value?
Right. And it's weird because you don't want to place a value scale like that on human life.
Or I do, because as a Christian,
Right.
you know, you would say, why? Because the Bible says, thou shalt not murder. And it says that all human beings, you and I, and even little baby zygotes,
Right.
are made in the image of God. So
Right.
therefore they deserve equal protection and equal justice.
But then
So
for the woman, like, how would you see that perspective? Like, so if you got rid of the baby, it's murdering the baby, but does that technically count as murdering the mother?
no. Medically speaking, if I understand, and I don't have a degree in medicine, people throw it in my face, the doctor's oath is a Hippocratic oath that says do no harm. So
Right.
their obligation is to save life.
Right.
And so in a situation where I don't even know if they honestly exist, oftentimes physicians will tell a woman, if you don't get rid of this child, that, you know, you're going to die. And I know many women that were told that and then said, no, I'm going to keep this baby, and if I die, and they have a healthy baby.
So it's a woman's choice, you know?
I think it is a woman's choice over her own body, but it gets complicated because now she has a body in her body.
Right.
And who has the right over that body?
The child's body? So that's a good question. So would you say it's the woman and the father, or would you say it's just the woman?
I would say the child
the child is its own.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't believe in slavery times that
Right.
slaves were human beings, and so it was my plantation, my choice, my slave, my choice. I get to do what I want, and you can't, because you don't have a slave. Now let's say you don't have a uterus,
Right.
you don't have a slave, so you don't have a right to give an opinion on whether I kill my slave or not.
Okay.
Well, now we have, you're not a man, so you don't have a right to have an opinion whether somebody, well, abolitionist.
I honestly think that it's wrong to say that someone doesn't deserve to have an opinion. Everyone's going to have an opinion whether you like it or not.
The question is, what
and it's-
is their opinion? I'm sorry for interrupting you.
Yeah, it's
Go ahead.
okay. No, I just think it's interesting to compare it to a slave, because I mean, I'm not sure well, it's the thing, that's the thing about it. If you want to give that baby that autonomy to itself, the baby can't defend itself, so I can see where you would say, oh,
Yeah.
the baby can't stand up for itself. But
And if you watch videos of abortions, 20 weeks or whatever, you know, these little babies will swim away from the saline. I saw one recently. It was an ultrasound while they put the vacuum tube, the cervix is dilated. They put the vacuum into the cervix, and there's the babies like going like as babies do, and all of a sudden, there goes the baby sucked into this vacuum.
So what about I'm not trying to argue. I'm just
No. These are good questions. I don't see you as argumentative at all.
I knew that was you.
What?
Are you crashing out?
I'm not crashing out. We're having a conversation.
How you doing?
Good, how are you?
Good. I'm Norman.
Hi Norman, I'm Kaylin.
Nice to meet you, Kaylin.
They call me Kale. but-
Yeah, cool.
So what would you do in the case where, say, do you have a wife?
Yes.
So what-
And I have a little boy that's 20 months old.
Oh, that's
I have 5 grown kids.
That's wonderful.
I mean, 4 grown kids and a little boy that's
Have they
20
told
months.
your wife before that she medically, if she has this baby, she won't survive?
No, actually, I was married before, and 2 of my kids had the RH factor where the mother's blood was
yeah.
attacking the child, and so, you know, you have to be careful, you should get rid of the child and all this, and I had 2 beautiful little babies. No, I would say to the doctor, always save both. Try to save both. And if he came out or she came out of the operating room and said, I tried to save both, but they both died, my heart would be broken. I tried to save both, but your wife died, my heart would be I tried to save both, but your child died, I would be heartbroken.
What if-
Or I tried to save both and I did.
So if your wife told the doctor to try and save her instead, what would you say?
I don't know. I mean, that would be something that she would say, but if I were in the place, I would say try to save both. I mean, a doctor is obligated to save both.
Right.
under the Hippocratic oath that they take, do no harm. And if they are to do no harm, they should try to their best ability to save both human beings, because they're both human beings.
Right.
And as soon as physicians, we had physicians in Nazi Germany that did experiments on the Jews because they didn't believe that they were human beings. And I mean, there's terrible things in Nuremberg. There's a lot of people that have come out and said that they did horrific experiments on human beings in Nazi Germany because they didn't believe that they were truly human beings.
So if it were, so if you had to choose, say your wife was just not able to respond to whether she could tell the doctor, please save me or please save the baby, and it was your choice, who would you save?
I would say both. See, oftentimes,
But what if you couldn't choose?
I appreciate that.
I know it's like, seems argumentative, but
it's not
it's a real question. Like,
it is a real question, but what is behind the question is a desire to put me into a false dilemma. It's a false dilemma that I must now choose between this human being and this human being.
It's a hypothetical question.
So, but the purpose of the hypothetical question is to get me to loosen up on my absolute position, which would be all human beings are created in the image of God.
Right.
So every human being should have the chance for life, medically speaking, if at all possible.
Right.
So as a Christian, since I believe that all human beings are created in the image of God, and that the physician's obligation is to try to save both, I would just still say, save both.
Right. All right.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for talking to me. I think
Yeah. You're one of the most thoughtful people I've talked to. Usually people walk by and swear and say,
everyone's experience is different, and I feel like if we really want to come to a consensus about what we believe, especially with something like abortion, first of all, neither of us will solve anything. If you were here yelling at people, it would just make people mad.
Yeah, exactly.
And if we can't have conversations about it.
Well, people usually yell at me, and that's the truth. I will sometimes yell after somebody says, "F you, you'll have a uterus." Well, come on back and have a conversation.
Right. I think the conversation is important because.
But here we have two worldviews in conflict, because some would say you're trying to impose your Christian worldview upon society, but I would equally say your worldview has already been imposed upon me as a Christian, so that over 100 million babies have been killed in the United States because of a religious belief that babies are not human beings. And it continues here in the state of Connecticut.
So do you think that the belief that babies are human beings is a religious opinion or a scientific opinion?
I don't think science can answer the question. I think science may, because a science can say, scientifically speaking, a zygote.
Right.
I would say to a scientist, can you observe that this is alive? Yes. Second question, can you observe...
Has a scientist said yes to that question?
No, but they would. They would.
In this
a zygote, yeah. And the second question is
alive?
Yes, because it is alive. A cell is going to multiply. It's dead. It's not going to.
Is created?
Yeah, with a sperm and an ovum.
Okay.
Yeah. The second question I would say is, what kind of zygote is it? And they would say it's a human zygote.
Okay.
So I would say we have a live human. So now we leave science, and now we're in the realm of theology, because it is a theological, philosophical statement to say babies in the womb are not human beings. Well, how do you know? Based on what? What religion tells you? Not you personally, scientists. What gives you the authority or the right to say what is or is not a human being? They don't. Unfortunately, legislators can, and then they'll pass laws according to that. And my goal is, in the Connecticut Foundation to Abolish Abortion, is to abolish it. See, pro-life is like, we'll have some laws that have some abortion.
So abolish is like, no matter the case.
Yes.
No matter if it's a kid, if it's a rape case, if it's anything.
Yes.
You can't abolish a child, even if it's going to kill another child.
Let me say it in another way. No matter, under no circumstances do you or I or anyone else have the right to kill another human being.
Okay. Okay, so can you, so I'm just curious, I'm not.
Yeah, I know, it's a great question.
How is a zygote alive?
Well, it's alive because it continually grows cells.
Okay, right.
If it was dead, it would just pass out of the woman's body.
How it grows cells?
With the division of cells and so forth, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, within, if I understand zygotes, that for 3 to 4 days they remain as a single cell creature. Eventually they do attach to the uterine wall, and then the placenta begins to develop, and so does the umbilical cord, and then the child begins to get more nutrients, obviously, all its nutrients through the umbilical cord.
So what is your opinion on what some people may argue that if women should be forced to not get abortions, men should be forced to get like vasectomies? Or men should be the ones to take that responsibility?
Well, I think men should take the responsibility, absolutely.
What do you think about men birth control?
I don't, as a consistent Christian, I want to be consistent with my belief that all human life is created in the image of God. If a couple decides by choice that they're not going to have sex and not have kids, I don't think that's a sin. I think that, is it a sin if they decide to use condoms or do other forms of birth control that do not cause the fertilization of an egg?
Do you consider that a sin?
What?
The act of preventing it from happening.
No, I don't think biblically you can do that. I do think that it would be a sin to do the chemical abortifacient birth control that does not allow a fertilized egg to attach to the uterine wall.
And you think that's not?
I would have to be consistent, and I've said this publicly before. My first wife and I, we used a form of birth control that allowed for the fertilization of eggs, but not to attach, and I repent of that because I believe I have children in heaven.
Yes, sir.
God bless you. Thank you. I do believe I have children in heaven that are my children, but they just passed out of my wife's body at the time. So someday when I go to somewhere in heaven, I believe that hopefully I'll see all those children.
So I guess I just have one more question.
Yeah, but I can ask all the questions.
Just so I understand, right? Your ultimate position is like, no matter if it's like a child who was raped, if it was some kind of case where this child is just not wanted at all, by even if the father might have wanted it, if the mother doesn't want it, she should still have it.
Yes.
Okay.
And she can give it up for adoption, but I don't think one human being should have the right to kill another human being.
What if the father doesn't want it, but she does?
Well, I think legally speaking, if we know who the father is, I think the state is obligated to force that man to take responsibility for it. I'd be glad to talk with you if you want. I think the state should be obligated to force that man to provide for that child, even if he's not involved with the child's life, 100%. And if there was a rapist, I have two thoughts on as far as a rapist is concerned. One thought is they have violated another human being. If they are found guilty, I have no problem with the death penalty for such a son of a you-know-what. The second thought I have is, well, you know what? Why execute the man? He should be forced to provide for that child for the rest of his life. Not necessarily to be involved with the child, but to provide, because he has done a heinous act against another human being that has affected the lives of 2 human beings now. And maybe even for the woman that he violated. So I kind of going back and forth. Biblically, I'm not quite sure. I think the death penalty usually is the case for those who commit rape. The Bible is very stern about that. Nobody should be raped. And if somebody does, and the purpose of the law is not only to punish evildoers, but it's also to act as a constrainer against evildoers. So if a person knows that the state is very hard on rapists, I bet you rape would go down. There's many women I've talked to that have been raped. They go to the police station and the police are like, whatever. And they get them to sign off and say, yeah, I have people very close to me, women that have had that experience where the police pestered them to the point where they had to retract their statement and live with the guilt and the shame and the horror of the abuse that they went through. And that's horrific. The state should be...
It's a very traumatic experience, but would you say the act of a child having to give birth to another child...
That would be hard.
That would also be very traumatic.
But abortion... Good question.
Do you support... If the government wants to force people to have abortions...
Force them to have abortion or force them to have children.
Not have an abortion. Yeah. Or force them to go through with the childbirth. Do you agree that there should be legislative action to give more care and federal aid to the survivors of this birth.
I think yes. I could say that, but I also believe that the church is obligated also. The church, the state does so much because the church has gotten into being a business, that the church's job should be to provide for women that have gone through this. But the church is all about, their own fiefdom and building their little business.
So you feel very strongly about the church and the state and like law
Separation,
in general. You believe in the separation?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. But I don't believe in the separation of the state and God. I believe in the separation of church and state.
Yeah, a lot of America, I think when it was initially being created, I mean, I don't know much about that history, but a lot of it seemed based on Christianity. That was a big,
yeah, biblically speaking, there's three realms of authority. There's the family, there's the state, and there's the church. And each realm has their own authority. Like the family has the duty and right to raise children, right? That's really what it is. And in a family, they have the say of what happens to their children. The state shouldn't, and the church shouldn't. The church's realm has to do with sin, has to do with worship, has to do with, those types of things. And the state has to do with punishing evildoers. So as soon as the state, if the church acts like the state, we have the Inquisition. And if the state acts like the church, well, that would be Inquisition as well. And if the state begins to take over the role of the family, now we have some form of communism, Maoism, Stalinism, and so forth, where the state becomes over everything. And we're moving in that direction. I think the United States is very much moving the direction where the state has so much authority, so much power, and interference in our lives.
All right. Thank you for talking with me.
Yeah, Eliza, it's wonderful. Yeah, very thoughtful questions.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.